Alright, so in this video we're just going to be looking at validation rules and verification. So some of these things you would have seen in IGCSE, but let's go through these slides and let me know if you have any questions. Why do we need validation? And give an example of a situation. So validation takes place when data is input into a computer system. The purpose is to ensure the data is sensible and conforms to defined rules. So an example, if you have a railway season ticket, okay, that ticket will have an expiry date on it. The season ticket is valid until it expires. Once it expires, it is invalid. The rule here is that the date the season ticket is used must be before its expiry date. So that is why we need validation, and here is an example. But we'll be having a look at specific validation rules when we look through the next few slides. So what happens when correct or incorrect data is entered? So when data is validated, if it conforms to the rules, then it will be accepted. If it does not conform to the rules, then it will be rejected, and an error message will be presented. Validation does not ensure that data is correct. So what is a presence check? So now we're going to go through the specific validation rules that we can use in our software. So presence check is the first one we're going to look at. So a presence check is used to ensure that data is entered. If data is entered, then it is accepted. If data is not entered, then the user will be presented with an error message asking them to enter data. So just think of like if you fill out a form, or like in Gmail, or if you log in into Facebook, or log in into Teams. If you type in your username, but you leave your password blank and just hit enter, it might show a message saying like, you have not entered your password. So that's an example of a presence check. It has to make sure that data that has to be entered is entered by the user. So here's some examples. So when filling in a contact us form on a website, it is essential that an email address is entered. The following would be valid if only a presence check is carried out. So you might not even put a proper email address in, but the presence check will accept whatever you enter because it only checks that data is entered. So you might say A or A at B, etc., etc. So it doesn't actually make sure that the data you type it in is of the correct form, but that at least you've typed something in. So notice that none of these are correct, but they pass the rule that data must be present. So what is a range check? Give examples. So range check ensures that data is within a defined range. So here's some examples. An opinion poll was taken and asked for the respondent's age. The respondents had to be at least 18 years old. So the lower boundary is 18. There is no upper boundary, so this is a limit check. This could be written as the age of the person must be greater than or equal to 18. So if there's only one boundary involved in your criteria, then it's a limit check. So a range check is going to be where you have two conditions that your values must meet. So just to have a look at another limit check. So letters represent grades for an exam are entered. Only the letters A to E are valid grades. The grade must be less than F. The upper boundary is E. There is no lower boundary. So this is a limit check. This could be written as the grade must be less than F. And here is an example of a range check. The number of students in a class must be between 5 and 28. The lower boundary is 5. The upper boundary is 28. So this is a range check. So you can have two conditions here. This could be written as the number of students must be greater than or equal to 5. And the number of students must be less than or equal to 28. So when you have one condition, it's a limit check. But when you have two conditions, it's a range check. So what is a type check? And give examples. So type check ensures that data must be of a defined data type. So if an age is entered, it must be an integer. If a grade is entered, it must be text with no numbers. If a price is entered, it must be numerical. And if a date of birth is entered, it must be a date. So it's just to make sure that the data types that are being used are of the correct form. So age must be an integer, etc. So it's making sure that what you type in is of the correct data type. What is a length check? Give examples. A length check ensures data is of a defined length or within a range of lengths. So for this example over here, if you've ever had to put in a password for an account that you're using, sometimes it says that your password must be 8 characters or more. That's an example of a length check being used to make sure you're giving a password that satisfies that condition. So just a number of examples. So a password must be at least 6 characters long. A grade must be exactly 1 character long. It's like A, B, C, D, etc. The product code must be at least 4 characters, no more than 6 characters. So it's a length check and some examples. So what is a format check? And give examples. So a format check ensures data matches a defined format. It sometimes is known as a picture check, and the data has to follow a pattern. So some examples here. So an email address must include an @ symbol, preceded by at least 1 character and followed by other characters. The following data would be valid. So john@bldef.co. So as long as there is this @ symbol with a character before it and a character after it, then the format would be satisfied in this case. So student ID is another example. So you must say that it must be 4 numbers followed by 2 letters. The following data would be valid. So as long as the first 4 characters are numbers, 3827, followed by 2 letters, so BD, then that data will be accepted. So as long as the data that you are putting into the system is of the form that is required, then the format check will allow the data to be accepted. But if it's not of that form, if maybe the person here put 382C BD, because the first 4 characters aren't only numbers, it would be rejected. So that's a format check and some examples. So what is a lookup check? And give examples. So a lookup check tests to see if data exists in a list. So there is some file that is stored on the system which has valid information or data that is accepted in the field that the user might be typing in. So a lookup check tests and checks to see if the data that the user enters in, let's say for example in the text box, if that data actually exists in the file that the system is storing. So let's have a look at some examples. So when asking a user their gender, they can respond with male or female. So a lookup validation rule would check to see if the values are within this list. So there would be some file, it would have the information male or female for the gender. So if someone doesn't type in male or female, so if they type in something else, then what would happen is it will return an error because that gender does not appear in the gender file, which would be accepted. Students taking a qualification could be issued grades of pass, merit, and distinction. So in inputting the data, a validation rule could check that only X, P, M, or D are entered, and X would be a fail. So it would have these symbols in some file. So if you typed in, for example, let's say C, you'd notice that C is not part of these symbols. Okay, and these symbols are stored in some file by the system. So if C is not amongst these symbols, then the system will give an error message back to the user.